The first time Marjorie Bell parked in my driveway, I thought it was a mistake. The seventh time, I understood it was a declaration of war. My name is Caleb Whitaker, and that Friday night started with rain tapping hard against my windshield, the smell of wet asphalt rising through my truck vents, and my headlights catching the bright white rear bumper of a Lexus sitting across my driveway like it owned the place. I had just finished a 12-hour shift repairing commercial garage doors on the east side of town, my hands still smelling like steel dust, motor oil, and black coffee gone cold in the cup holder. All I wanted was to pull into my own garage, take off my boots, and heat up the leftover chili waiting in my fridge. Instead, I sat at the curb in front of my own house, engine idling, wipers scraping back and forth, staring at a car that had no business being there. The Lexus was parked at a crooked angle, nose toward my lawn, rear wheels over the red line I had painted along the edge of the concrete 2 weeks earlier after the third incident. My porch light threw a yellow glow across the hood, and every raindrop on that polished paint looked like a little warning light. Across the street, the Bell house was blazing with music and laughter. Their HOA wine night had spilled out onto the front porch, all glass clinks and perfume and fake neighborly smiles, while my driveway had apparently become overflow parking. I pressed the horn once, not angry yet, just tired. The sound rolled down the quiet cul-de-sac and bounced off the beige stucco houses. A dog barked somewhere. A curtain moved in the house next door. Nobody came out. I pressed it again, longer this time, and that was when Marjorie Bell stepped onto her porch with a wine glass in one hand and an expression like I had interrupted a church service. She was in her late 40s, white, polished, the kind of woman who wore pearls to a neighborhood budget meeting and called it leadership. She walked across the wet street without an umbrella, heels clicking against the pavement, smiling in that thin HOA president way that never reached the eyes. "Caleb," she called, as if we were old friends, "you don't need to make a scene." I rolled down my window and felt the cold rain blow across my face. "Marjorie, your car is blocking my driveway." She glanced at the Lexus, then back at me, as though the driveway had somehow failed to explain itself properly. "It's just for a little while. We have guests. You have plenty of street space." I looked down the curb. There was no street space. Cars lined both sides, bumpers tucked too close to mailboxes, tires kissing the grass, every empty foot already claimed by somebody from her party. "This is my property," I said. "I need to park in my garage." Her smile tightened. "In this community, we try to be flexible." That word stuck in the air, soft and rotten. Flexible. That was what she called taking something that didn't belong to her and expecting me to thank her for the lesson in manners. I stepped out of the truck, boots splashing into the gutter, rain sliding down the back of my neck. Behind her, 3 people stood on her porch watching, one of them holding up a phone like this was entertainment. Marjorie lowered her voice just enough to sound dangerous while pretending to sound reasonable. "You're new here, Caleb. People around here share. That's how we keep things pleasant." I had lived in that house for 14 months. I had paid the mortgage, repaired the fence, replaced the cracked driveway slab, and kept every receipt in a folder in my office because my father taught me that paper remembers what people deny. I looked at the Lexus again, at the water beading on the windshield, at the smug little HOA parking pass hanging from the mirror, and something quiet shifted in me. Not rage. Rage is too loud, too easy to waste. This was colder than that. This was the moment I stopped treating Marjorie's behavior like a misunderstanding and started treating it like evidence. "Move the car," I said. She laughed once, short and sharp. "Or what?" I remember the rain getting heavier right then, drumming on the roof of my truck, running in silver lines down the windshield, blurring the Lexus into a white shape blocking the life I had paid for. What Marjorie did not know was that I installed access systems for a living. Gates, arms, sensors, card readers, commercial parking controls, the kind that do not care how important you think you are. And what she really did not know was that the next time she parked in my driveway, she was not going to be blocking me out. She was going to be locking herself in. Marjorie did not move the Lexus right away. She stood there in the rain, one hand on her hip, letting the silence stretch across the cul-de-sac like she expected me to fold first. I could hear the bass from her living room thumping behind her front door, low and steady, mixed with the hiss of rainwater rushing along the curb. My truck idled behind me, headlights shining through the wet air, and every second that passed made my own driveway feel less like concrete and more like a line somebody had dared me to cross. I am not trying to ruin your evening, I told her, keeping my voice even. I am asking you to move your vehicle off my property. She tilted her head and gave me that little neighborhood smile, the kind people use when they want witnesses to think they are calm and you are the problem. And I am telling you that your attitude is exactly why the board has concerns about you. That was the first time she said it out loud. The board. Not my neighbor. Not a woman who had parked wrong. The board. Like 5 people with matching clipboards had more claim to my driveway than the county deed recorded under my name. A man on her porch chuckled into his plastic cup. Someone else whispered, and the phone stayed pointed in my direction. I felt the cold rain soaking into my work shirt, smelled the damp leather of my tool belt still sitting on the passenger seat, and suddenly I understood the performance. She wanted me angry. She wanted me loud. She wanted a clip she could play at the next HOA meeting and say, "See, this is the kind of resident we are dealing with." So I did the most disappointing thing I could do for her. I nodded. I pulled out my phone, opened the camera, and took 3 pictures. One of the Lexus blocking the driveway, one of the license plate, one wide shot showing my garage, my mailbox, and the painted property line. Marjorie's smile twitched. "Are you seriously photographing my car?" "Yes." "That is very hostile." "It is documentation." The word landed heavier than I expected. Documentation. Her eyes moved from my phone to the red line under her rear tires, then to the security camera mounted above my garage door. I had installed that camera after the 4th time she used my driveway for her guests, not because I wanted drama, but because I had spent too many years repairing gates for businesses that learned too late that memory is useless without a timestamp. "You really are making this unpleasant," she said. "No," I replied. "You parked across my garage. I am making a record of it." Her face hardened, but only for a second. Then she turned, waved toward her porch, and called, "Tom, move my car for me." A gray-haired man in a navy quarter-zip jogged down the steps with the keys, avoiding my eyes like the pavement had suddenly become interesting. He climbed into the Lexus, started it, and reversed just enough to clear the driveway. Not all the way to the street, not to a legal space, just enough to prove they could have done it at any time. I pulled into my garage slowly, tires rolling over the wet concrete, the smell of rain following me inside. When the door came down behind me, the house felt too quiet. My leftover chili sat in the refrigerator, untouched. My boots left dark prints across the kitchen tile. I stood at the counter with my phone in my hand and looked through the photos one by one. This was not the first time. It was not going to be the last. The next morning, a folded notice was taped to my front door in a clear plastic sleeve. The HOA letterhead sat at the top in dark green ink, formal and smug. It accused me of creating a disturbance, misusing my vehicle horn, and displaying unneighborly conduct during a community gathering. At the bottom, in Marjorie Bell's perfect looping signature, was a warning. Further incidents could result in fines. I read it twice while the morning sun warmed the wet driveway, and the birds chirped like nothing had happened. Then I opened the folder in my office where I kept my property survey, my closing documents, and every photo from every time her car had crossed that line. Marjorie had just made her first real mistake. She put it in writing. By Monday morning, I knew exactly how Marjorie Bell operated. She did not start with shouting. She started with paper. Paper on doors. Paper in mailboxes. Paper with letterhead that made ordinary bullying look official. I sat at my kitchen table before sunrise, the HOA notice flat beside my coffee mug, while the neighborhood outside slowly turned from blue-black to gray. My house was quiet except for the refrigerator hum and the soft click of the wall clock over the pantry. The driveway beyond the front window was empty, wet from the sprinkler system, peaceful in a way that almost felt insulting. I read the letter again, not because I was scared of it, but because every sentence told me how careless she had become. Misuse of vehicle horn. Unneighborly conduct. Interruption of community gathering. Not one word about the white Lexus blocking a private garage. Not one word about my property line. Not one word about the 6 earlier incidents I had already reported. That was the thing about people like Marjorie. They believed authority was a costume. Put the right logo at the top of a page, use the right formal words, add a signature at the bottom, and suddenly a lie could walk around wearing dress shoes. I opened my laptop and created a folder titled Bell Parking Record. Then I transferred every photo from my phone. The first one was from late March, a silver sedan half on my driveway apron during a Sunday brunch at her house. The second was from April, her Lexus parked with one tire touching my grass. The third showed two guest vehicles angled across my curb cut during a board meeting. The fourth was the night she told me people around here share. Each image had a timestamp, a location tag, and the same quiet truth. I had been patient longer than most people would have been. At 8:15, I sent a calm email to the HOA board. I attached the photos, my property survey, and a copy of the county parcel map showing the full width of my driveway and apron. I wrote everything plainly. I did not insult Marjorie. I did not threaten anyone. I asked that all residents and guests be reminded not to block private driveways, and I requested that the warning notice against me be removed from the record. I hit send, leaned back, and watched steam curl off my coffee. For 3 hours, nothing happened. Then my phone buzzed. The reply came from Marjorie herself, not the board. "Caleb, your tone is concerning. The driveway apron is visible from the street and therefore subject to community standards. Please avoid escalating this matter." I stared at the words until the screen dimmed. Community standards. She had invented a phrase big enough to cover anything she wanted and vague enough to mean nothing. I wrote back with one sentence. "Please provide the specific covenant section granting HOA parking authority over my private driveway." She did not answer that question. Instead, 30 minutes later, a second notice arrived by email. This one included a $100 fine for continued argumentative correspondence. I laughed once, not because it was funny, but because the absurdity had finally crossed into something useful. She was building the record for me faster than I could have asked. That evening, as the sun dropped behind the maple trees and turned the wet pavement orange, I walked the driveway with a tape measure. From the garage door to the sidewalk was 38 feet. From the left edge of the concrete to the right was 16 feet. More than enough room for my truck, my work trailer when I needed it, and absolutely no room for Marjorie's ego. I marked the measurements in a notebook, then crouched near the side of the driveway where the concrete met the flower bed. The smell of damp mulch mixed with the sharp scent of chalk dust as I snapped a line near the edge. That was where the post could go. Clean. Legal. Inside my property. A commercial-grade boom barrier did not need drama. It needed power, clearance, and a reason. I had all three. The next morning, I called the city permit office, gave them my address, and asked about installing a private access control arm on residential property. The clerk on the phone paused, clicked through something, then said, "As long as it is entirely on your parcel and does not obstruct the sidewalk or street, you can apply for a minor improvement permit." I wrote every word down. Then I asked her to email the requirements. When the message came through, I printed it and slid it into the folder behind Marjorie's fine notice. The paper stack was getting thicker now. So was my patience. And for the first time since that white Lexus appeared in my headlights, I felt the shape of the ending. The permit approval came on Thursday afternoon while I was standing in aisle 12 of a hardware store, holding a box of concrete anchors in one hand and a coil of low-voltage wire in the other. My phone buzzed against my palm, and the city email opened under the bright white store lights with one simple sentence that made the whole week feel suddenly quiet. Minor residential improvement permit approved. I stood there between shelves of drill bits and gate hinges, smelling sawdust, rubber, and cardboard, and smiled so slightly that the old man comparing padlocks beside me probably thought I had remembered a good coupon. I did not celebrate. I did not post anything. I did not send Marjorie Bell a warning. That was never the point. Loud people confuse silence with weakness, and Marjorie had been making that mistake since the first night she smiled at me in the rain. By Saturday morning, the sky was pale blue, the air smelled like cut grass, and my driveway looked ordinary enough to fool anybody who had not been paying attention. I backed my truck into the garage, unloaded the equipment, and laid everything out on a moving blanket. One yellow and black aluminum barrier arm, one steel post assembly, one control box, two safety photo eyes, reflective tape, conduit, mounting brackets, anchor bolts, a keypad, and the printed permit sealed in a clear sleeve. The barrier was not huge. It was not ugly. It was the kind of access control arm you see at private lots and office parks, clean and practical, built for one job: deciding who gets in and who does not. I measured twice from the garage side of the sidewalk, keeping every inch inside my property line. The chalk mark from earlier in the week was still faintly visible near the flower bed, and when I snapped a fresh line across the concrete, the blue dust cracked through the morning air like a tiny flag being planted. Across the street, Marjorie's blinds shifted. I did not look up. I drilled the first hole, and the bit screamed against the concrete, sending a sharp, gray smell into the air. Dust curled around my boots. The vibration traveled through my wrists and up into my elbows, familiar and steady. This was work I understood. Not board politics. Not fake warnings. Not neighbors whispering behind curtains. Steel, measurements, power, alignment. Things that either fit or did not. By noon, the post stood straight, bolted down with the control box mounted neatly at waist height. By 2, the conduit was run, the safety sensors were aligned, and the arm lifted and lowered in a smooth mechanical sweep that made a soft electric hum before settling into place across the mouth of my driveway. I tested it 10 times. Open, close, open, close. The yellow stripe flashed in the sunlight every time it moved, bright as a caution sign. A couple walking a golden retriever slowed near the curb, and the woman gave me a polite smile. New gate, she asked. Access control, I said. Private driveway. She nodded like that explained everything, because to most normal people, it did. At 4:15, I placed the permit sleeve inside the front window of my garage, visible from the driveway, but not waving in anyone's face. Then I mounted a small sign to the barrier post, private driveway. No unauthorized parking. Vehicles blocking access may be cited or towed at owner expense. The words looked almost boring, which made them perfect. Marjorie's mistake had always been thinking justice needed a raised voice. Mine came with a permit number, a timestamp, and a clean installation. That evening, her house filled up again. Cars arrived one after another, tires whispering against the curb, doors closing, laughter floating through the warm air. I sat at my kitchen counter with a glass of iced tea, the folder open beside me, and watched the reflection in the dark window. At 6:32, the white Lexus rolled slowly across the street, paused in front of my driveway, and Marjorie's face turned toward the new barrier like she had discovered a personal insult made of metal. She did not park there that time. She parked 2 houses down and walked back with stiff shoulders. But as she passed the end of my driveway, she stopped just long enough to read the sign. Then she looked up at my house. I could not hear her through the glass, but I saw her mouth form the words clearly enough. We will see about this. I took 1 sip of iced tea, opened the Bell parking record folder on my laptop, and added a new entry. Barrier installed, permit approved, observed by Marjorie Bell. The first official complaint about the barrier arrived before sunrise on Monday, stamped with Marjorie Bell's name so neatly it almost looked printed by a machine. I found it in my email while the coffee maker sputtered on the counter and the first trash trucks rumbled somewhere beyond the cul-de-sac. Outside, the barrier arm rested across my driveway in the gray morning light, quiet and still, a yellow line between my house and everybody else's assumptions. The subject line read, unauthorized structure and visual nuisance. I clicked it open, already knowing the rhythm of her language before I read the first sentence. She accused me of damaging the appearance of the neighborhood, creating a safety concern, and installing commercial equipment without HOA approval. Then came the part one expected, a demand that I remove it within 72 hours or face daily fines. I stood there in my socks, warm mug in hand, and felt no panic at all. That was when I knew her power had started to shrink. People only rush the clock when they are afraid the facts are catching up. I forwarded the email to the city permit clerk with 1 sentence asking whether my approved access control arm violated any city requirement. Then I printed Marjorie's complaint, punched 2 clean holes in the top, and slid it into the folder behind the installation photos. At 7:45, my doorbell rang. The sound echoed through the front hall, too sharp for that early in the morning. On the porch stood Marjorie in a cream blazer, white pants, and sunglasses even though the sun had barely cleared the roofs. Beside her was Tom with a clipboard and the expression of a man who wished he had stayed home. Behind them, 2 neighbors hovered near the sidewalk, pretending to walk slowly past my mailbox. I opened the door before she could ring again. "Good morning, Caleb," Marjorie said, smiling for the audience. "We need to discuss the arm." "The barrier is permitted," I said. I sent the documentation to the board. Her smile tightened. Permitted by the city is not the same as approved by the association. Show me the covenant that requires approval for access control equipment installed entirely on private property. Tom looked down at his clipboard. Marjorie did not. She stepped slightly closer to the threshold, perfume cutting through the smell of wet grass and coffee. This is not about legal tricks. This is about community harmony. There it was again, the soft blanket she liked to throw over hard facts. Harmony meant she parked wherever she wanted. Harmony meant I stayed quiet. Harmony meant the rules bent toward her driveway and away from mine. I reached to the small table beside the door and picked up a copy of the permit in its clear sleeve. Here is the permit number. Here are the placement measurements. Here is the survey showing the post and arm sit fully inside my parcel. You are welcome to review them. She did not take it. Instead, she glanced over my shoulder like she expected to see guilt hiding in my hallway. You are making yourself a problem in this neighborhood. I looked past her at the barrier arm, yellow stripe catching the morning light, completely motionless. No, Marjorie. I solved a problem on my property. For 1 second, her face went still. Not angry, not embarrassed, just blank, like a door closing inside a house. Then she turned to Tom and said, loud enough for the neighbors to hear, document his refusal to cooperate. Tom wrote something down, but his pen moved slowly. Later that afternoon, the city clerk replied. The barrier complied with the approved permit as long as it remained clear of the sidewalk and public right-of-way. I printed that email too. By 5 o'clock, a third HOA notice appeared in my inbox, this one adding $250 in fines for failure to remove an unapproved structure. I saved it without answering. That night, thunder rolled low beyond the subdivision, and rain began tapping against the garage window. I stood inside beside the control box, watching the barrier arm shine under the porch light. The same rain smell from that first Friday drifted through the cracked side door, damp concrete, fresh mulch, electricity in the air. I knew Marjorie would not stop with emails. She needed a public win. She needed me humiliated in front of the neighborhood. And people like that always come back to the same place where they think they won the first time. My driveway. By Wednesday, Marjorie had stopped pretending the problem was the barrier. The problem was that the barrier had taken away the one thing she loved most: access without permission. I saw it in the way she slowed her Lexus every time she passed my house. Her sunglasses pointed toward the yellow arm like it had insulted her personally. I saw it in the way Tom stopped waving from the mailbox. I saw it in the sudden silence from the other board members, the kind of silence that comes when people realize a fight may have paper trails on both sides. That evening, I came home around 6 after repairing a broken roll-up door at a grocery store on Route 19. The air smelled like hot pavement and fryer oil from the takeout bag on my passenger seat, and the sunset had turned the subdivision windows orange. I pressed the remote clipped to my visor. The barrier arm lifted with its soft electric hum, smooth and clean, and I pulled into my driveway like any homeowner should be able to do without asking permission from a woman with a clipboard. As the arm lowered behind me, I noticed Marjorie standing across the street beside 2 neighbors, talking with her hands. She did not look at them while she spoke. She looked at my driveway. I took my food inside, washed my hands, and was halfway through a container of chicken fried rice when my doorbell camera sent a motion alert. My phone lit up on the counter. There she was, walking up my driveway with Tom behind her and a third man I recognized from the HOA landscaping committee. Marjorie held a folded paper in one hand and the small smile of someone arriving with an audience. I opened the live feed but did not go to the door. The camera microphone picked up her voice clearly over the crickets. This is a formal board inspection, she said to the lens, as if the camera were a receptionist. The homeowner is refusing compliance. Then she stepped to the barrier post and began reading from the paper, listing violations that sounded important until you noticed none of them named an actual covenant. Visual obstruction, inconsistent exterior equipment, unapproved mechanical improvement, community inconvenience. Tom stood 3 feet behind her, saying nothing. The landscaping man shifted from one foot to the other, staring at the sign that said private driveway. I saved the video while it was still recording. Then Marjorie did something that told me she had run out of legal language. She reached toward the barrier arm and pressed down on it with 2 fingers, testing it like she thought it might give way to attitude. The arm did not move. The control box gave one short warning beep, not loud, not dramatic, just a clean electronic chirp that made her pull her hand back. "It is defective," she said immediately. It beeped at me. I almost laughed, but I kept chewing because some moments are better untouched. She looked at Tom. "Write that down." Tom finally spoke, quiet enough that the microphone barely caught it. "Marjorie, maybe we should have the attorney look at the permit first." Her head snapped toward him. Not harsh, just fast. The smile disappeared. "We are the board," she said. "We do not need permission to enforce our standards." That sentence was the gift. I clipped the video from the moment she said formal board inspection to the moment she said they did not need permission, saved it in the Bell parking record folder, and backed it up to a cloud drive. The next morning, I received a new violation notice claiming I had installed a hazardous device that interfered with community access. Attached to it was a photograph of Marjorie standing beside my barrier, pointing at it like a museum guide showing a dangerous artifact. I opened the photo, zoomed in, and noticed something she had not. In the reflection on the control box cover, her white Lexus was visible across the street, parked beside a red curb under a no parking sign near the fire lane entrance to the clubhouse path. The timestamp was right there in the corner, 7:14 in the evening. I printed the photo in color, placed it behind the video transcript, and circled the reflection with a red pen. Marjorie had tried to turn my barrier into evidence against me. Instead, she had handed me proof that while accusing me of creating a hazard, she had parked in a marked no parking zone herself. The photo changed the temperature of the whole situation. Until then, Marjorie had been building a story where she was the protector of the neighborhood, and I was the difficult homeowner with the strange equipment. But that reflection in the control box made her story crack down the middle. It was tiny, almost accidental, a curved strip of chrome catching the white Lexus under the no parking sign, but the timestamp turned it into something solid. I spent Thursday evening organizing everything on my kitchen table. The folder had become thick enough that the metal clips strained when I opened it. Photos on the left, notices on the right, emails in order by date, permit documents in a separate sleeve. The city clerk's approval printed twice. The doorbell video transcript highlighted in yellow. And now Marjorie's own violation photo, with the red circle around her illegally parked car. Rain tapped against the window again, softer this time, and the barrier arm glowed under the porch light like a quiet punctuation mark. I did not send anything right away. That was important. People like Marjorie lived on instant reaction. They poked, waited for noise, and then used the noise as proof. I gave her nothing. On Friday morning, the board sent a notice for an emergency HOA hearing scheduled for Saturday at 10 in the clubhouse. The subject line said resident compliance matter. The body said my attendance was strongly recommended. I knew what that meant. They wanted chairs filled, whispers ready, and Marjorie standing at the front with her papers, turning my driveway into a public lesson. I replied with 2 words, "I will attend." Saturday morning smelled like fresh-cut lawns and pool chlorine. The clubhouse sat at the entrance of the neighborhood, beige walls, fake shutters, and a flagpole that squeaked every time the breeze shifted. I arrived 10 minutes early carrying a black binder and a thumb drive. Inside, about 20 neighbors had gathered in folding chairs. Some looked curious. Some looked uncomfortable. Tom sat at the board table with his hands folded. Marjorie stood near a projector screen in a navy dress and pearl earrings, smiling like she had already won. "Caleb," she said warmly, loud enough for the room. "Thank you for finally cooperating." I nodded and took a seat in the front row. The room smelled like burnt coffee, carpet cleaner, and the lemon cookies someone had set beside the sign-in sheet. Marjorie began with a slide showing my barrier arm from the street, cropped tight, so the sidewalk, the permit sleeve in my garage window, and the private driveway sign were all missing. She called it commercial, disruptive, intimidating, and inconsistent with community values. Each word landed carefully. Each word had been chosen to make a simple permitted barrier sound like a threat to civilization. Then she displayed the fines. $100, $250, daily penalties beginning Monday. I watched neighbors shift in their chairs. One man crossed his arms. A woman near the back whispered to her husband. Marjorie turned toward me with her practiced smile. "Do you have anything to say before the board votes?" I stood slowly, carrying the binder to the table. "Yes," I said. "But first, I would like the record to show that my installation is fully permitted by the city and entirely within my property line." She lifted a hand. We are not here to discuss the city. Actually, I said, opening the binder, that is exactly where this starts. I handed copies of the permit to Tom and the other board members. Then I handed out the survey, the city email, the installation measurements, and the original photos of Marjorie's Lexus blocking my garage. The room got quieter with every page. Paper has a sound when it changes people's minds. It is not dramatic. It is a small shuffle, a pause, a throat clearing. Marjorie tried to interrupt twice, but Tom raised one hand and kept reading. Then I plugged the thumb drive into the clubhouse laptop and played the doorbell clip. Her own voice filled the room, clear and bright. We are the board. We do not need permission to enforce our standards. Nobody laughed. Nobody whispered. They just listened. When the clip ended, I clicked to the last image. Her violation photo appeared on the screen, then I zoomed in on the reflection. The white Lexus sat beside the red curb under the no parking sign, clear enough for every person in that room to understand. I turned back to the board. This photograph was submitted by Marjorie as evidence against me. It also shows her vehicle parked in a marked no parking zone while she was accusing me of creating a safety issue. For the first time since I had known her, Marjorie Bell had no sentence ready. The silence in the clubhouse lasted longer than any argument Marjorie could have made. The projector fan hummed against the back wall. The flagpole rope outside tapped softly against the metal pole through the open window. Somewhere near the coffee table, a paper cup crinkled in somebody's hand. Marjorie stood beside the screen, her face still composed, but her eyes had changed. They were moving too quickly now, from the image on the screen to Tom, from Tom to the neighbors, from the neighbors back to me. That was how I knew she was no longer thinking about rules. She was thinking about control slipping out of her hands in a room full of witnesses. Tom cleared his throat and leaned closer to the printed packet I had given him. Marjorie, he said carefully, did you submit this photograph with the violation notice? Her chin lifted half an inch. It was part of the inspection record. And that is your vehicle in the reflection? She glanced at the screen, then away. The reflection is distorted. A few chairs creaked. I clicked the next slide, a still frame from my doorbell camera taken at the same minute, showing her white Lexus parked beside the red curb from another angle. No reflection, no distortion, just the car, the sign, and the timestamp. The room got even quieter. Tom stopped pretending to read. The landscaping committee man who had accompanied her to my driveway stared down at his shoes. I kept my voice calm because calm was the only thing Marjorie had never learned how to fight. I am not here to embarrass anyone, I said. I am here because I was fined for protecting access to my own garage after repeated parking violations by the person issuing the fines. A woman in the second row, Mrs. Harlan from 2 doors down, raised her hand before anyone invited comments. My daughter could not get her car out during one of those wine nights either, she said. I never reported it because I did not want trouble. Then Mr. Decker, the retired mail carrier on the corner, spoke up. Delivery trucks have been blocked near that bend more than once. His voice was quiet, but it carried. That red curb is there for a reason. One by one, the room shifted away from Marjorie's version of the neighborhood. Not loudly, not cruelly, just honestly. The kind of honesty that had apparently been waiting for somebody else to go first. Marjorie tried to recover with a smile. These are separate issues, she said. We are discussing Mr. Whitaker's hostile installation. It is permitted, Tom said, and this time his voice had weight in it. He turned to the other board members. We need counsel before issuing any further fines. Counsel, Marjorie repeated, like the word had insulted her. We have authority under community standards. Show the section, I said. I did not raise my voice. I did not need to. The phrase landed in the same place every unanswered email had landed. Tom looked at her. The other board member, a quiet woman named Denise, opened the covenant book in front of her and began flipping pages. Thin paper whispered under her fingers. Marjorie looked toward the audience, searching for support, but she found only folded arms, lowered eyes, and people who had suddenly remembered their own blocked driveways, their own unfair warnings, their own moments of swallowing frustration to keep the peace. Denise finally stopped on a page and shook her head slightly. I do not see anything here covering a permitted barrier on private driveway property. Marjorie's pearl earrings caught the fluorescent light when she turned. This is bigger than one driveway. No, I said. It became bigger when you used the HOA to punish me for asking you to stop parking there. Tom looked at the fine sheet again, then at me. Mr. Whitaker, pending legal review, I move that all fines related to the barrier be suspended. Denise seconded it before Marjorie could speak. The vote was not dramatic. No gavel slammed. No one cheered. 3 hands went up, slowly, and just like that, 72 hours of threats, daily penalties, and official-sounding nonsense stopped breathing. Marjorie gathered her papers too quickly, edges bending under her fingers. As people began standing, Mrs. Harlan passed me and whispered, "Thank you." Outside, the morning sun flashed across car windshields in the clubhouse lot. I walked back home carrying the black binder under one arm, feeling the weight of it against my ribs. When I reached my driveway, the barrier arm was down, steady and bright. For the first time, it did not look like a defense. It looked like a boundary that everybody could finally see. The board's legal review took 11 days, and in those 11 days Marjorie Bell became quieter than I had ever seen her. Her Lexus stopped slowing in front of my house. Her blinds stopped twitching every time I came home. The HOA emails went from sharp and immediate to cautious and delayed, like somebody had finally placed a hand over the microphone before she could speak. I kept living my life. I went to work. I fixed loading dock doors and grocery store shutters. I came home with dust on my jeans and the smell of machine grease on my hands. Every evening, I pressed the remote on my visor, watched the barrier arm rise, rolled into my own driveway, and heard it lower behind me with that soft electric hum that had started to sound less like machinery and more like peace. Then, on the second Tuesday morning, the official letter arrived. Not from Marjorie, from the HOA attorney. It was printed on heavy white paper, folded once, and written in language so clean it almost sparkled. All fines related to the access control arm were rescinded. The board acknowledged that the installation was located on private property and supported by a valid city permit. The letter also stated that future enforcement actions involving parking, driveway access, or private improvements would require review by outside counsel before any fine could be issued. I read that sentence 3 times at my kitchen counter while sunlight spread across the tile and the coffee maker clicked itself off. That was the real victory. Not the money. Not the apology they did not quite right. The system she had used like a personal hammer now had a lock on it. And for once, she did not have the key. But the twist came that Friday night, almost exactly 2 weeks after the rainstorm that started everything. Marjorie hosted another gathering. I saw the cars arrive one by one, slower this time, more careful, each guest checking the curb signs like the neighborhood had suddenly grown teeth. I was in the garage sorting tools when the doorbell camera chimed. On the live feed, Marjorie's white Lexus rolled into view and stopped at the end of my driveway. For a second, I thought she was just passing. Then her reverse lights flashed. She backed toward my driveway, angled the car the same crooked way she always had, and stopped just outside the barrier arm, blocking half of the apron and part of the sidewalk approach. She sat there, engine running, as if waiting for me to come outside and give her the reaction she had been starving for. I did not move. I saved the camera feed, picked up my phone, and called the non-emergency parking line. My voice stayed calm. My hands did not shake. I gave the address, described the vehicle, and explained that it was blocking a driveway apron and obstructing pedestrian access. 24 minutes later, a city parking enforcement truck pulled up under the streetlight. The officer stepped out with a flashlight, looked at the red curb near the corner, looked at the sidewalk clearance, then walked to my front door. I handed him the permit, the survey, and the attorney letter through the screen. He read them quietly, nodded once, and returned to the Lexus. Marjorie came out of her house fast, still wearing her party smile, but it faded when the ticket printer began buzzing in the officer's hand. That little machine made the smallest sound, barely louder than a receipt at a grocery store, yet somehow it carried across the whole cul-de-sac. A white slip curled into the air. Then the tow truck arrived. Nobody shouted. Nobody had to. Her guests watched from the porch with silent glasses in their hands while the Lexus was legally hooked, documented, and removed from the space she had spent weeks claiming she was entitled to control. The next month, Marjorie resigned as HOA president, citing personal reasons. Tom took over temporarily, and the first email he sent to the neighborhood was a simple reminder: private driveways are not community parking. I printed that email and placed it at the very back of the Bell parking record folder. Then I closed the folder and slid it into the bottom drawer of my desk. The barrier is still there today. Most people barely notice it anymore. Delivery drivers wave. Neighbors park where they are supposed to. Mrs. Harlan's daughter gets out of her driveway without asking anyone for permission. And every time I come home at night, tired from work, headlights sweeping over that yellow arm, I remember the rain, the white Lexus, the fake fines, the cropped photos, and the sentence Marjorie once threw at me like a threat. We will see about this. She was right. We did see. Everybody did.